Well, good day and welcome back to the channel. Well, I'm in the process of working on a Hermes 3000. This belongs to a local typist. She bought this in 1964. The serial number traces it to 1963. This is the earlier body style of the Hermes 3000. And I don't think it's ever been serviced. She says she never remembers servicing it, and it was really dirty, and a lot of the screws are really hard to turn just because they've been sitting like that since it was built new in 1963. Well, I've been working on this yesterday afternoon and evening, and I'm at a point now where I'm making pretty good progress with it. Before I finish it, I thought it would be just fun to show you a couple of the issues that I had with this machine, some of the problems, what I had to do to fix them. But in general terms, this machine was just really dirty. It actually worked. Almost all the keys were working fine. Nothing too bad. I think the tabulator or the all clear for the tabs was sticking, things like that. But it was actually working the way it was. Kind of a nasty, musty smell, which is gone now. But let's take a look at some of the issues I found with this machine. So to get the body shell off these machines, you have to remove the carriage. And I know that sounds daunting if you're familiar with other typewriters, but basically on the right side of the carriage, you want to turn this screw so that bracket turns 90 degrees. And on the typewriter's left side, you want to turn this screw, it's a right-hand threaded screw, so that bracket turns 90 degrees. And now the carriage, you can just pick it up and remove it. And that's how you get the body shell off. Take the carriage off first. One problem that the carriage had is the paper support fingers were stuck to the back panel. And it turned out there were some little pads, they look like chamois leather pads that had been glued on to act as kind of a shock absorber, and the glue had penetrated through the pads and stuck to the panel. So what I use some double-sided foamy tape with a piece of tape, regular tape, on the front side, so the front side is not adhesive, but it acts like the little shock cushion that was originally on there. So that's nice. So the carriage was very dirty, needed to be cleaned and degreased, and I want to point out to you this surface here, right next to the tabulator rack. That surface is where the brake shoe, the tabulator brake shoe, rides against. And you want to make sure this surface is degreased thoroughly. You don't want any oil or lubricants on it, or the tabulator brake will slip. And that was one of the problems I had. And then also, I didn't have enough spring tension toward the end of the carriage travel, so I had to tension up the spring motor a bit. So as I operate the tabulator key, you can see the mechanism releases the loose dog from the escapement wheel, allowing the carriage to freely move. And then the tabulator brake shoe raises up onto that braking surface. This is a hard piece of cork. I've cleaned the surface with alcohol. I also used a pair of pliers to push up the braking shoe a little higher, but I need to adjust that a little bit more. The braking force is not quite adequate, and it tends to move a little fast toward the end of the travel. But that is the tabulator itself and the brake shoe for it. And this arm that's moving, that is the all tab clear. So this arm engages that tabulator braking surface bracket, and when the bracket moves, it pushes all of the tabulator slugs back to their rest position. Once you have the carriage off the machine, it's a good opportunity to loosen these two screws and take out the card guide. The card guide was pretty dirty, and I found what works really well is some WD-40 with cotton buds. You don't want to use alcohol on these clear card guides because it'll cause the plastic to get cloudy, and also you don't want to hit the paint on the lines here underneath here. And then once it's put back on, as I have put it back on here, once you get a new ribbon in the machine and get it aligned, then you want to align the card guide here so that the typing line is aligned to these marks here. And I need to adjust this screw. This washer is in the proper position. This one is underneath the plastic. I need to fix that. Like that. Now that screw and washer are in the right position. I just need to loosen these now and adjust the guide to the typing line once the machine's all back together. Well, one of the problems I encountered was the tab all clear key would stick in the down position. And it took me a while to figure out what was causing this. Let's take a look. So this moving linkage is for the all tab clear, and what was happening was this bracket right here, there's two of them, this one and this one, and they're both supposed to support the machine on the base plate. And this one was bent up a little bit, so it was obstructing the movement of this guide rod. And so I just straightened it out. So apparently the machine at one time had received a sharp blow to the bottom panel of the machine, and it bent it up, and that's what caused that problem. So once I had taken the carriage off and started cleaning and servicing the machine, at some point after I was moving the chassis around, at some point I noticed a spring had come loose. A small spring had come loose, and I didn't know where it went to. I went and looked at the typewriter repair Bible, but I couldn't really find it. But I did notice that there were some springs right here on the bell clapper and on the margin system, and there's a little hole up here, and I thought, well, maybe the spring attaches there and maybe it doubles up one of the other springs. But I have another Hermes 3000 in my collection, and I went and compared it, and it has this same bracket with a hole in it and no spring. So the spring didn't go there, it went somewhere else. So I set the spring aside until later. If a problem showed up in the machine, maybe that would be where it goes. And sure enough, a problem did show up. So after I got the carriage back onto the chassis and started testing the machine, I noticed that the tabulator, when I pressed the tab key with some tab stops set, the carriage wouldn't stop at the tab stops. And this is the mechanism that actuates it. And this bracket right here slides. There's a slot on it. It slides on this screw. And the other end of that bracket is supposed to be the bracket that the tab stops hit. Well, that spring that had fell out of the machine, I didn't know where it went, but it seemed like this top corner of this bracket had a little hook folded over on it. And this bracket here, which is hard to see, there's a hole in it, like for a spring. And it looked like this bracket needed a spring tension to push it up, to keep it pushed up. And that's where I put that spring that came out of the machine. And when I did that, the tabulator started working again just normally. So that, I think, is where this spring went, and it certainly fixed the tab problem. So the ribbon vibrator was hanging up, especially in the red position or lower half of the ribbon position where the vibrator moves the most. And it took me quite a while to get it unstuck. I was using alcohol on all the different surfaces, eventually had to use lacquer thinner. It was just a lot of gunk built up underneath between the inside surface of the vibrator itself and the bracket, the type guide bracket that it rides on. So this is one thing you definitely got to check, is to make sure that vibrator is not sticking, even intermittently. So it takes a lot of testing to make sure that it's right. Okay, to put the carriage back on, you first want to make sure that these two brackets are horizontal. And I should mention that if you back out these screws too far, more than the minimal amount necessary, what happens is the two plates raise up, and then you can't get the carriage to set back down on these two surfaces. This beveled surface with a pin, this beveled surface is where the two brackets for the carriage have to sit on, and the bottom edge of the carriage bracket has to sit on the tip of these two set screws, which sets the position of the carriage relative to the printing position. So I have the carriage lock engaged on the carriage. You can see perhaps one of the brackets here. So this little guide right here, you want to fit it so it fits in between these two right here, like that, and then set those 2 feet down onto the position, and then you're going to want to turn the screws. This one is left-hand threaded, so turn it counterclockwise till it locks. The one on the right, which is the machine's left, is regular right-hand threaded, nice and secure. And when the carriage is properly seated and you turn the screws to lock these plates, the plates will be in the vertical position, and there will be no gap, there'll be no space between the bottom of the plate and the plate underneath. It'll be all tight. And the same thing on the machine's left. This bracket should be vertical. The bottom of the carriage bracket should be sitting, resting on the tip of the screw, and there should be no play or no gap underneath this rotating bracket and the carriage bracket itself. They should all be flush and tight. And unlock the carriage. And there it is. So I wanted to test out the machine and check out the alignment and how it types without putting a ribbon in it. So I had some carbon paper. And here is the typing test. And this is like a Techno typeface. Hermes has several Techno typefaces. So there you go. It looks like the alignment is really good on the upper and lower case, on feet in motion. It's a really nice styled typeface. Looking forward to getting this machine done and seeing how it types on good paper. So another problem I had was intermittently the carriage release would not release the carriage to enable it to be moved by hand. This little silver bump just above the screw, that is pushed down by a bar on the bottom of the carriage. When I push the carriage release, you see that bar that just shows up there on top? That pushes that little silver button there, which pushes this arm down, which releases the escapement. So most typewriters, the carriage release slides or pivots the rack gear out of the way. But on the Hermes 3000, the rack gear stays engaged, and instead they have a separate bar that pushes this linkage that disconnects the escapement. So anyway, there's a screw there, and I loosened the screw and I raised up this arm. There's a slot here that's adjustable, and I raised this up so that it engages that bar sooner. And now this bar pushes that linkage down far enough to reliably release the escapement and allow the carriage to move freely. It feels slightly stiffer or heavier than it should. The touch selector is at its lightest setting, so I think I'm going to take it out to the garage and squirt a bunch of solvents like alcohol into the joints and blow it out, kind of dynamically degrease it, and hopefully that will lighten up the touch a little bit. But none of the type bars are sticking. It all feels pretty smooth. So one of the good things about these Hermes 3000s is that you can easily get to the inner workings of the escapement and tabulator and all that, because you have to take the carriage off just to be able to get the body shell off, and the carriage comes off really easy with those two big screws and those two rotating brackets. That works really well. I had this carriage on and off multiple times in the course of fixing it. And yeah, one of the issues that I caused was when I loosened those two big bolts to rotate the brackets, I unscrewed them too much. And as a consequence, trying to put the carriage back on, it wouldn't go on. So when you do turn those bolts to rotate the bracket 90 degrees, just turn the bolt enough to rotate the bracket and don't raise the bolt up any higher. That'll save you a lot of grief. So I will have to take the carriage off again to put the body panel back on eventually. The body shell and the base, the bottom of it needs to be cleaned. I've already cleaned the keys, and most of the machine is really ready to go, ready to put a ribbon in. I think I'm going to leave the body shell off, however, for a few days just to test it, because a lot of times with these old machines that have been gunked up for so many years, you might think you've adequately cleaned and degreased it, but you want to let it sit and then retest it. And sometimes problems will show up later, intermittent problems that you'd rather catch now than when the owner of the machine picks it up and then they're unhappy. So I'm going to do some testing with it before I put it together finally. But I also wanted to mention, however, one of the big resources that helped me was the Hermes 3000 Typewriter Repair Bible that our friend Ted Monk publishes. This was a really helpful book to help me, especially with the alignments. This Hermes 3000 book is really good on alignments, how to align everything. And before I close, I should probably also mention that I have a shoebox, and this is my chemicals, servicing chemicals that I use for servicing typewriters. Let's take a quick look at it. So, some basic tools and supplies I use. Well, of course, a set of long nose or needle nose pliers is handy. This plier I found along the banks of the Rio Grande, totally rusted out, took it home, cleaned it up, put some heat shrink tubing as a grip, works pretty good. An old toothbrush is always handy for cleaning the machine, especially the type slugs. A variety of small slotted screwdrivers, what we might call tweakers back in the 1970s. Some tweezers are very handy. Of course, a variety of spring hooks are also very handy and useful. A long, skinny slotted screwdriver that's magnetic is also handy. Let's look at some of the chemicals I'm using. Well, WD-40 actually comes in handy for cleaning things like the clear card guides and cleaning stains off of certain kinds of smooth paint finishes is real handy. If you do use it in the mechanism, though, make sure you clean the residue out. You don't want to let it sit. I like to use the spray wax. This is Mother's California Gold spray wax to polish up all the plastic surfaces like the keys and the bodywork, especially for these smooth painted bodyworks. That's a good way to clean the paint without risking damaging it. If you use alcohol, you could damage the paint. Having a set of gloves is handy to keep your hands clean from solvents. I have a squirt bottle using 91% isopropyl alcohol. I have another squirt bottle that I use lacquer thinner on, and I have a third squirt bottle that I use LA's Totally Awesome Degreaser. This is a great degreaser, and this is what I use to clean the keys. They were really gunked up with half a century's worth of grease. LPS1 is a spray lubricant. This is what Bill Wall uses in Mesa Typewriter down in Arizona. I use it for some things, for lubricating some things. It's also nice to have Hops lubricating gun oil. It's nice to have a firearms lubricant and a general Zoom spout, sort of a general purpose lubricating oil is really handy also. And then I have a little kit here that has a couple tweezers and a pair of scissors that I use for putting ribbons in so I don't get my hands dirty. I just use a couple tweezers for manipulating the ribbon. And I also have, Deoxit. Deoxit is an electrical degreaser, and there's two versions of it. This is the version that has a light lubricant in it. And I found at certain times this comes really handy for degunking certain kinds of connections in the typewriter that might not respond well to alcohol or even lacquer thinner. Sometimes the electrical degreaser with lubricant works best for certain applications. It's good to have multiple things in your toolbox for that. And of course, naphtha is always a handy lubricant to use for certain applications. And then I have this box. We have white lithium grease that I use occasionally. And there's a little secret ingredient in here that you might not be aware of, which is graphite, dry graphite lubricant. I've actually had some luck with certain things that were really difficult using graphite. And gear and bearing oil or grease, this comes from the late 1980s when I was a TV repairman. This is a VCR grease. So if you're into old style video, you can use that. And then there's some multi-purpose synthetic grease, which is also handy. And what else is in here? Oh yeah, rubber renew. There's no substitute for replacing the platen with new rubber, but sometimes you can get a little bit extra grip out of it, or the feed rollers, by using that. These flat brushes for putting on hair dye and permanents. You can get these at beauty supply places, Sally's Beauty Supply. These are really good brushes for brushing and removing eraser crumbs and all kinds of residue from typewriter mechanisms. Highly recommend those. I also have an assortment of old paint brushes. This is a really handy one, about 1 inch wide and about 2 inches long. This is really good for getting deep into the crevices and getting out crumbs and things that are hard to reach. And then having a couple small little paint brushes is also good for fine cleaning of residue out of the mechanism. The skinny handle can get into places that a bigger paintbrush or toothbrush won't reach. And here's a handy little container, Renaissance wax. This is great for shining up those black shiny typewriters like my Corona 3. Always got to have a little bit of Renaissance wax and a soft cloth and put the finishing touches on a really shiny typewriter. So that's just a few of the tools and the supplies that I use for typewriter service. Well, I thought I would give you guys a little glimpse into the hobby of typewriter servicing as I'm in the middle of this, finishing it up. So this lady that I had met at the Albuquerque Museum on our New Year's Eve event, she mentioned she had a typewriter, and I'm not in the business of doing typewriter servicing, but I'm a hobbyist. But I kind of play it by ear, and if I see somebody that needs a typewriter fixed, I sometimes will accept it and do it for them. So going forward, we are lucky in Albuquerque to have John Lewis. He's 80 years old and will be probably retiring. A couple of years ago, he said he was going to be retiring, but the guy keeps working. But eventually he will retire, and we won't have ready access to a typewriter shop here in town. So it is a good thing to learn how to service some of your machines. I'm not a super duper expert on a lot of things. I'm learning, as most everybody is, but I just thought it would be fun to do a little behind the scenes on some of the equipment and materials I use and some of the problems I came up with servicing this Hermes 3000, which is going to be a really nice machine for her to use. Well, I wish you the very best in your creative pursuits, and as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day, and bye-bye for now.